They said big tech would rule the world, but there's a churn and a bloodbath going on inside of big tech with 35% more layoffs in the first 3 weeks of January than in all of 2022. I'm Barkha Dutt, here with the Mojo story. Our focus today is on something that should actually be on the top of our headlines. What is going on in the world of big technology? Why are we seeing these mass layoffs? None of the giants have been able to spare their employees, whether it's Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Spotify, or even some of the smaller, lesser known startups. What is the reason? Was there a kind of inflated sense of the future that is now being burst? Is this the second time that the dot com boom in a new avatar is being burst? And is artificial intelligence going to take away more jobs? How do we understand what's happening and why are employees waking up to automated emails? How horrible could must that feel finding out that they've lost their job? On the program today, we have perhaps, I think, the best collection of distinguished experts from all across the world. It's taken some managing of time zones to gather them all here, from New York to New Delhi, from San Francisco to Singapore. This is something that is sparing nobody, and so this is a very, very global panel of distinguished experts in the world of technology, as well as impacted young people who are here to share their story. Let's bring up our guests now as we introduce this very, very distinguished panel of speakers. Up first is Asha Jadeja Motwani. She's a well known venture capitalist on the West Coast, and she also, of course, leads the Motwani Jadeja Foundation. It's good to see you. From the program, an Indian perspective is Akshay Chaturvedi. He's the founder and CEO of Leverage EDU that works on sending young people outside of India for education. Remember, many people today who've lost their jobs will be struggling to get a work visa. So, Akshay, I'm sure a lot of young people looking at this will have questions for you, even about the studying stage. Also on the program today is Anshu Sharma. He's the co-founder and CEO of Skyflow. He might have a somewhat more optimistic take. At least that's what I gather from reading his tweets. We'll find out more in just a moment. We're also very pleased to have with us one of the best known Indian American technology entrepreneurs and thought leaders, Mr. Vivek Wadhwa. I follow his writings closely, and I'm sure we'll all benefit a great deal from learning and hearing from him today. Also, grateful especially to Darshil Shah. Mr. Shah has been laid off at Amazon. It's not easy for young people to come out today and say, hello, I've been laid off. So we really appreciate in this moment of vulnerability, Darshil, for you to come here and share your story. Thank you, and more power to you. And finally, we have Deedy, a suitably trendy West Coast name. Deedy is the founder engineer of Glean. He's had many previous avatars, including at Google. So good to see you, Deedy. And like I said, it doesn't get to be a better panel than this. Let me start with Vivek Wadhwa, if I may. What's going on? Why is this happening? Is this linked to the economy? Is this linked to marvels like ChatGPT? Is the worst yet to come? Mr. Wadhwa.
Barkha, Silicon Valley has a habit of burning down and reinventing itself every few years. So what happened was that during the pandemic, it overhired. And now the first opportunity it has, first excuse it has, it's cleaning up. Now, a lot, so from the Indian perspective, there's been a lot of coverage about the Indians who are impacted about it. Yes, there's a serious problem with people on H-1B visas, and that's something I've written a book about. I've been very vocal about is America's flawed immigration policies. For Indians over here who are on H-1B visas, they're stuck in the system. They'll probably never get green cards, and they have to reconsider what to do with their lives. That's one big problem. But as far as the layoffs go, it's nothing big here. I know many people who've been laid off, and most of them are happy that they get a few weeks off during the Christmas holidays, and they'll get multiple job offers when they're ready. That's how it is here.
So, do you see anything getting better at all? If this is indeed correction, as it were, for what happened in the pandemic, Mr. Wadhwa, could it get better? Will it stabilize, or is the worst yet to come?
No, no, no. I think the worst is behind us. Yeah, there'll be some more layoffs in some companies, but by and large, Silicon Valley will move along and it'll jump onto the next big fad. I mean, whether it be Web 5.6 or some other craziness, It's going to be the Me Too, fad. Everyone jumps on it and they'll hire like crazy, and then they'll lay off like crazy. That's the way the valley goes. That's the magic of Silicon Valley. Whether you love it or you hate it, that's the way things work here.
So you're not sounding that perturbed, other than if you think about, like, from an Indian perspective, so many young people who are going to be struggling to get a work visa. But in a way, you're describing this as a self-correcting mechanism that has taken place, an overcorrection, if you will, or an overhiring that is now being corrected, if you will. Asha,
Right.
Jadeja, Motwani, do you agree with Vivek?
I agree that this is pretty common. These are cycles that happen every few years, and we find that something or the other, goes wrong, and then you have a little bit of a panic, a little bit of layoffs. But in this particular cycle, I think the layoffs have been spurred by two or three reasons. One is that a lot of tech companies were hoarding engineers, programmers, from mid-level mediocre engineers to really sort of just junior, freshies, who they were hoarding because they knew that this is something that they will deploy later on. The second thing is this whole phenomenon of activist hedge funds, mutual funds that own a stake. For example, in Google, there is an activist fund that owns a significant stake, and it is exercising its right to say, we want you to lay off some people and make this a leaner operation. And I think Google might have listened to some of its stakeholders. So there are these 2-3 big reasons that I'm seeing floating around. As far as the H1B, the Indian engineers go that have been laid off, first of all, most of them have 6-month severance pay. So a lot of them are really just taking time off. I know 2 or 3 people myself who are taking a few months off, just going to Yosemite, Lake Tahoe, skiing, and hoping to come back and find something. One person I know was laid off from Slack and actually was rehired immediately by another big company. So there is that also going on. So I mean, I don't think there's going to be a whole bunch of people going back to India, although it will be more difficult for the H1Bs. But in general, I think the Valley is so resilient, and it is so, frankly, it's just so heavily funded. It has just so many venture capital funds and so much money sloshing around that I see it bouncing back pretty quickly.
Okay, so I think you make this great, an important point that many of those laid off are not sort of on the lower end of the income groups. They're well-paid employees. They've got good deals. But does that take away from the sting of this? And is it everybody in that boat? There are many young people in their early 20s that I've been speaking to who've also lost their jobs. Before I come to the others, I just want to bring in Darshil. He's here as somebody who recently got laid off at Amazon. Darshil, it must feel horrible. And so, again, I have to thank you for coming here and sharing your story. You've heard the kind of optimism from Mr. Wadhwa and Miss Motwani. What do you say? I mean, when you got that pink slip, did you feel anger? Did you feel dismay? Were you expecting it? Go ahead, Darshil.
Yeah, Barkha. So first of all, it took some time for me to digest how the things are going on. And yes, definitely, it's not a problem for people who are like green card or holder or citizens over here. But for people who are on H1B or other work visa, they have very limited time to find another job. So same for me. I came here for my master's. I have completed my master's from Arizona State University. And then after
If I may ask, which part of the United States are you in, Darshil?
So right now I'm in Austin, Texas.
I see. Go ahead.
So yes. So to continue on that, I completed my master's from Arizona State University and directly joined Amazon as a software developer. So, and now here after 7 months, I received an email saying that I've been laid off. And yeah, so people on H1B just has 60 days to find a new job. And people on F1 has around 90 days to get a new job. But as I said, like I am new to the industry. I just had worked for 7 months in the industry here in United States. So there are companies looking for senior developers and senior positions, but For people like me who have just entered their career, it is
Yeah.
little bit difficult to get a new job. And
And as Mr. Wadhwa and you have pointed out, you have just 60 days to find a new job to basically have your life continue on the trajectory you thought it would be on, right, Darshit?
yes, so for people who are on work visa, money is not a problem for them, but definitely the time limit is a problem.
Yeah. And I'll come back to, a lot of other emotions you may have. We've seen a lot of anger, for example, at Google, where Sundar Pichai said he had to do this. He was deeply sorry, but he had to avoid worse things happening if he didn't do this. Now, I want to bring in Anshu from Skyflow. Anshu, here's the question. Both Vivek and Asha have made the argument about a resilient Silicon Valley. This will settle down. There was an overhiring in the pandemic. This is a self-correcting mechanism. But what we haven't spoken about is OpenAI's Chat GPT, which has just cleared a Wharton entrance. It's cleared a medical exam. It's even written a whole book now called Alice in Sparkle. At one level, this is the magic of science. On the other hand, I'm sure this could be taking more jobs. Are we ignoring AI as a reason for why the worst may not be over, as Mr. Wadhwa thinks it is? Anshu, go ahead.
Well, as you said at the beginning, I'm an optimist, and history is proven. We started with 200-300 years ago, Mahatma Gandhi fighting about how we can't have factories producing yarn because then there'll be hundreds of millions of people without jobs and manufacturing t-shirts. And yet it's kind of weird. There is both fewer people employed making yarn. At the same time, countries like Bangladesh, India, and Vietnam have really become richer by an order of magnitude in the last 50 years. So there's this weird creative destruction thing that happens that very hard for average humans to visualize. If somebody comes in and takes away my job, or suddenly destroys my front yard, it's very hard for you to think like, oh my god, this could be creative destruction. We as human beings are not tuned to the idea of creative destruction, and that's
Is
why.
this creative destruction, or is there more to it?
Well, let me give you an example. So if I said we're going to step back by 3 months and say, hey, what's the state of affairs of jobs of software engineers in the US? Be like, everything is awesome. Well, if you actually calculate the number of people that companies like Google have laid off, they've literally laid off 5%, 10% of the people. Most of them hired 25 to 30% more people in just last 12 months.
Yeah.
I do think that they made a mistake in how they've done it. I mean, to be honest, this is where, I think Asha is right. There is sort of like what I call the dramatic effect of like laying off 10,000 people that makes your stock jump by 5%. In reality, they could have achieved exactly the same effect. Like you're seeing Amazon has 1.2%. They'll hire that many people in the next 4 weeks, probably. They could have simply said, we're not going to hire for 4 more weeks, and you should look at people who already have jobs and hire them. But then their stock wouldn't have gone up. The investors wouldn't be happy. So I'm quite actually troubled by the fact that we've reached a stage in our economy where the investors, because of low stock prices right now, are in control, and they love the idea of sort of blood on the streets.
So hang on. This is an important point that you're making. You're actually saying that investors might be pushing for layoffs because they want a higher stock valuation. That doesn't sound, terribly principled or ethical. On the
No.
other hand, it could be. On the other hand, it could be argued that that is the ruthlessness of a free market economy. Do you have an ethical problem with what's happening, Anshu? And then I want to open up your point. Deedy and Akshay haven't spoken, but it's a very important point to take around the panel. Do you have an ethical problem with how companies are handling layoffs?
I actually have slight ethical problem, but here is my more rational argument, because I know that if you're a capitalist with $100 billion in a fund, you don't really care if Anshu has an ethical problem with what you're doing. I actually think it's bad for them. If you go back 6 months, 9 months, these people were begging. They were begging for people like Herschel here and others to join them. They were begging to find 2 more engineers who could write code in Java or build ChatGPT. And the funny thing is, 6 months from now, they will be doing the same thing. They will again be begging. So
So
it's
you're saying
actually
what the companies are doing is bad for them, and that's an important point. And I know everybody will have things to say on what you said, but let's just bring in Deedy and Akshay first. Deedy, go ahead. We've had Anshu add a layer to this conversation, but to Darshan, who's sitting there saying, "I've got 60 days to find another job," this sort of $100 billion talk is something that some of you as promoters, as founders and CEOs understand, but an employee doesn't get it. And if for an employee, he or she is at the margins of that totem pole or the bottom of that totem pole, Deedy?
Yeah, I mean, the immigration situation is honestly atrocious. And it's not just Darshil who's a new grad. There's many people on H-1B who've been in America for, 10, 15 years. They've set up life here. They have a wife, they have kids, and they still don't have their green cards because of the backlog. For them, they have to now uproot their entire lives in 60 days and go. So that's obviously atrocious. However, at the same time, I don't agree with all of the opinions on whether this is a bad thing. A lot of these companies have too much staff. A lot of them don't need the amount of staff that they have. I spent some time working at Google and Facebook before, and at Google it's a very commonly known phenomena that people rest and vest. It's when you join, you spend some time there, and then you just make money for doing very little for a very long time. I don't think all companies have that culture. But in many of these cases, these companies are overstaffed. And one other point I'd like to make is I don't know if I necessarily agree that they've overhired in the pandemic. Actually, if you look at the percentage growth in headcount, a lot of these companies were hiring at the same rate that they always hired. Google hired 50%.
So then what's gone wrong? So then if that's the case, then why this?
Well, when the money stops flowing, then you need to cut back. And after the pandemic, earlier this year, the stocks all started crashing because advertising revenues can't keep up. Google knows it can't post their 20% profit that they in growth that they want to post every year. And if you can't keep profiting, that engine stops working, then you have to cut from the bottom somewhere. So the biggest cost you can cut easily is people. So,
Yeah, so let me bring in Akshay from an Indian perspective. Your sort of platform, Leverage EDU, works on sending young people or incentivizing them to study outside of India and not in the typical markets and universities necessarily. Young people today will be looking at this bloodbath and saying, is there a future? I'm not saying every young person wants to get into tech. There are many other new opportunities that have opened out, Akshay. But as a young entrepreneur, and the founder of a startup yourself, are you worried?
No, first of all, it's extremely all said and done. There could be multiple cycles and we could write thesis and big LinkedIn posts and all of those things. But the reality is that this is extremely, extremely, extremely sad for Darshil and tens of thousands of people who've actually lost their jobs, who have a family to provide. I think it's extremely, it's not been done in the right way. This was unwarranted. And maybe things will come back to better, but it is what it is today. We can of course look into the future and say that okay, 3 months, 6 months, 10 months later, everything will be fine. Another cycle will start. We'll have Web 10, but it is what it is today. We did a survey of about 1,000 people who had gone to the US last year using our platform, and we had 50% plus people who were able to get back into a job, but which was 30% less than the previous job. You have to also realize that US is a very deep, of course, like Ms. Motwani said, it's got a lot of capital out there, but it's also very deep, very layered market. You have 3,500 universities there. So you have people from the top 100, 150 universities who end up going to the likes of big four, the big tech, the Amazon and then the Metas and the Googles. But you have a large set of people. You have hundreds of thousands of people who are going to slightly less known companies. For those people, this has relatively been slightly easy. They've been able to get into jobs, sub $100,000 jobs, if I may say so. And people who have essentially, fortunately, unfortunately, been at slightly higher salaries because of the way the job market was moving. They had multiple offers coming their way. They picked up the best option. And I think now that rationalization has kind of come through. They will, of course, I'm very confident that they will find jobs which are slightly lesser than what they were getting at an Amazon or a Google or a Meta. That said, it is where it is today. And but I largely think that post this rationalization, the American dream or the British dream or the Canadian dream, that still stays alive. But you have to, of course, realize that it's not all as gloomy as you always think it would be, and you have to kind of figure out how you finance it, how you're going to pay it back, and
so
things
let
like
me let me bring in Vivek and Asha on the sort of kind of pot stirred by Anshu and Deedy. Anshu has an ethical question. Deedy has a more cynical take. That these are the big tech companies. You stay for a while, you don't do much, you make money if you can, and you get out. Mr. Wadhwa, to you. The ethical dimension that Anshu says these companies aren't necessarily being smart even for their own branding. Do you agree with that, or do you think this had to be done?
They got drunk during the pandemic because the revenue shot up. So yes, as a proportion of revenue, hiring was the same, but revenue shot up so much and then it dropped. They weren't expecting it. So the fact that they laid off people en masse was unethical, because if you look at Apple as an example, Apple, even though its revenue shot up, it didn't get drunk. It didn't do stupid things. It's not doing layoffs. So this is bad management, bad ethics, miscalculation, and stupidity really is what caused this mess for all these people being laid off. And again, for the vast majority of the laid off people, they'll get other jobs, because if you've been working at one of these big tech companies, you can easily get jobs. It's the immigrants to be the H-1Bs who are going to be hurt the most.
Well, I want to pick up a very important point that you made and take it to Ms. Motwani. Well-managed companies or better managed companies aren't in the same turmoil. We've seen an unrest at Google, for example, where Sundar Pichai has argued that this had to be done to avoid worse things. But Vivek Wadhwa makes the point that Apple has been, for instance, better managed than Google. Would you agree, Asha?
I don't think so. I actually think that Google has been pretty conservative, pretty well managed, and very, very employee friendly. So I actually think that it was a very, very difficult decision on the part of the Google team to lay off the people. I think there's one or two of the last ones to start laying off people. And I think if a lot of it may not have happened if there wasn't that kind of the activist fund, pressure that was building up.
Explain this activist fund. Explain this activist fund. We've also got Aditya Dutta. He's the head of worldwide support. It helps people who've been laid off to find their feet on the ground. But Asha, go ahead. Explain what you mean by activist funds.
So what happens is often there are these large, hedge funds or private equity funds that take an enormous stake in some of these publicly listed companies. And what happens is that they actually have the legal right to exercise their voice and to sort of ask for certain systemic or structural changes in companies, whether it's on employee side or whether it is on cost cutting, whether it's on, transparency, stuff like that. Normally, we didn't see too much of this till pretty recently, but this year, activist funds have been both for this one right now, especially for Google and for Salesforce. There are two companies where there is this, activist fund kind of a thing going on. And you find pressure from stakeholders saying that we feel that the company stock would do much better, our holdings would do better if you did these following XYZ things. And cost cutting on employees is always one of the first ones.
Yeah.
So that has been going. For me, the ethical issue is on who's taking care of the H-1Bs, because those are the lives that are going to be massively disrupted. And a lot of people I know are, they've been newly, married. They've just settled here. The wife might be on H4. And they might have had a baby, and my heart goes out to them.
And it's important to remember, Asha, as you've said, the human story. While we sort of debate management mantras, shareholder management, stock prices, there are young people like Darshil at the heart of what's happening. Anshu, just want to bring you in. You worked at Salesforce. Asha mentioned Salesforce. Vivek mentions a very important point about comparative management. How do you see it, Anshu Sharma?
It's an interesting week. There was Davos just about a week ago.
Yes.
All these people were there. They go on TV and they talk about how they really care about poverty and people and families and lives. And then, some hedge fund, if you're a $2 trillion company like Amazon or Google, what does a hedge fund with $100 billion really mean, right? Not much. I think what's happening is they could have chosen to just say, look, our stock price is going to be down for a few months and then it'll come back up, as will everything else. But they chose to take advantage of this pressure to eliminate certain people that they perceive are either too expensive, have been around for too long, etc., etc. Yeah. It's a very cynical taking advantage of the situation at the cost of oftentimes people that especially in the immigrant situation, can't easily find jobs. And the reality is, I know thousands of people who are in the situation, immigrants, over the last 20 years. I know maybe one person who's gone back to India. Like, how many do you know actually that went back and never could come back? But the stress of it really kills you, right? It's the stress of realizing that you thought you were it's like being in a 14-year relationship with a company, and then waking up, you think you've devoted your life to this company. You are the one who built Google. You are the one who built Salesforce.
Yeah.
And then you wake up and you realize that, well, like it was.
So let me ask Darshil, how long were you at Amazon, Darshil? Can we unmute Darshil? Hang on, give me a second. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a 7 month. I joined Amazon in June 2022.
And if I may ask, how old are you?
I am 24.
Right. So, these are very young people sort of at the heart of this. It's not only the sort of well-earning, top-of-the-pack people that we're talking about, Deedy, and that's important to remember. But I don't think anyone has head-on taken the point made by Vivek Wadhwa. Is this about poor management? Is this about poor ethics? Or is this an inevitable cycle?
I think,
Deedy?
my take is about the management. I don't think it's necessarily poor management. I think, these companies were doing the same thing for many, many years, and they did fine. I think it's really hard to predict the future. They didn't predict their revenues decline so much. Asha's right about the investor pressure as well. It's hard to have this conversation without, the big elephant in the room in the valley is Twitter laid off 75% of their staff, and they still function. And suddenly, a switch woke up in a lot of the investors' minds, and they're like, if you can function with 75% less cost, let's get rid of some of this cost. I don't think it's a bad or a good thing. Look, this is just how companies work, so I don't have a real opinion on that. But yeah, that's.
So let me just bring in Aditya briefly. Aditya helps people who've been laid off try and land on, with their feet on the ground. Aditya, what are you picking up from people you're talking to these days? How bad is it?
So it is pretty bad. I mean, well, as everybody in the panel has been mentioning, that people build their dreams around it. You join a big tech company, you look for a very fruitful future. You want to do just whatever you can to build yourself, to build that American dream, to build that Canadian dream. And all of a sudden, the business cycle comes in and a lot of them get laid off by the masses, right? And it's very disheartening. A lot of people lose hope. I think but it's very important. What I've been commenting on LinkedIn a lot of posts where people say that they got laid off and all those things, is that it's not they should not be losing hope at this point of time, right? So the skills that they have, they're working for the biggest tech giants. The cycle will come back, right? So it's the business cycles, they keep repeating. We had the similar kind of a story in 2008, 2009. People were getting laid off, and then we had another cycle, good run for next 10 years. Post-COVID, we had a huge, great resignation, people moving in from one organization to the other. And now we have this impending recession, which everybody feels is going to come somewhere in the middle of 2023 or by the end of it, right? So companies are kind of like gearing up. And
I think that's an important point. No one's spoken about the larger state of the economy, the fact that the global economy may be headed for a nosedive. I think I heard Satya Nadella say somewhere that there could be 2 more years of pain before this actually stabilizes. Just briefly before I come to Akshay, Vivek, you said the worst is over. Not every tech leader is actually making that argument. Why do you think the worst is over?
Because I don't think that the economy is going to crash as badly as people think, and a lot of the crash has been factored into the stock market, into the planning of these companies. Yes, they were stupid during the pandemic. They thought it would last forever, but they've woken up now and they realize they made a mistake, and they've all sort of made a correction, and they're smart. The fact that Satya Nadella is expecting 2 years of bad economic news, it means he's factored it into his plans, and things can only get better from there. So he's planning for the worst, and very likely things will be better than he expects, which means that they'll be hiring again, and Microsoft will continue its rise.
Let's hope that's the case for all the young people who are in the market. Akshay, one of the big debates ongoing in India isn't just about technology startups, but about startups in general, right? You have this constant debate, especially when startups get listed. Were they overvalued? That's a huge current debate on in India. So there's going to be a larger spill, as it were, from this tech debate to startups in general. How do you see that as the founder of a startup?
Sure. No, if you see startups, right, startup layoffs have to be seen very differently from the big tech layoffs. In the big tech layoffs, you have shareholder management, you have a bet like metaverse that did not work and things like that. But a lot of founders, including myself, are folks who haven't gone through multiple cycles, are folks who essentially who haven't gone through a phase where certain decisions essentially won't add up. The math won't add up when you kind of just hiring through the boom, you are preparing for your next round, series C, D, E, F, G, H, all the way out. And you realize that, okay, this has to be a certain 2 years budgeted in as well. So Satyan and Ella is well poised as a 25-year-old leader. Somebody's kind of been doing that for a long while to do that. But a young founder, of course, and hence they would need the right VCs, the right board to kind of come in, support them, and tell them that, okay, you mute your growth expectations. They would essentially step back 6 months back and say that, okay, so I did that. In sometime in October, and Anshu is a shareholder in my company. I sent out a shareholder letter saying that we're not going to grow the same way that we did in the last 2 years because we believe this is coming through, and we don't want to lay off anybody. And I think it's just about better management at the end of startups,
And that would be
they're
my
getting better support as well.
And that would be my old-fashioned question. I'm coming to you in a second, Aditya. I just want to bring in Deedy or Asha, anyone who wants to take this. There's a suggestion that why aren't people at the top taking salary cuts instead of getting rid of people at the bottom? Why should you get rid of people at the bottom? I know it's not the most capitalist question to raise, but it's still a human question. And if you talk to lay people, not laid off people, but lay people, they'll ask this question. Deedy?
Well, one correction is if you look at Google's layoff in particular, it's not just new grads. There's layoffs, surgical layoffs throughout the board, across the board. There's directors and VPs.
If they took the position, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but if they took the position that we'll protect those at the bottom, our severance is to people who are cushioned at least at an income level, I don't think there would be that sort of backlash to this idea of a layoff.
Barkha, I think it's because there's lack of clarity on what is actually being tried to achieve. I think people are on purpose or for bad reasons or whatever, fundamentally confused. Are we trying to just save money for the next 3 to 6 months while the economy is quote unquote bad? That could be achieved by just like not giving out bonuses for 3 months. Are we doing it because we want shareholders to be happy? Well, in that case, you have to keep the cost low for next 10 years and everybody should be getting laid off and such. Or are we doing it because the economy is about to transform to an AI economy, in which case you would be hiring all these engineers to work on ChatGPT so that you don't lose out to Microsoft? I think it's fundamentally like, let's do something, and if you do something, then you come across, how did all of these people simultaneously at the same time realize that they all need to lay off 5 to 8% of the population when all of them for 20 years have been saying, as Vivek has been pointing out, we need more engineers here from India, we need more STEM, we will die if we don't have more engineers. And my prediction is they'll be saying the same stuff 6 months from now. And this is just like sort of a sad thing at the expense of the most
expense of the most vulnerable is the important point, because Darsha's wanting to jump in and Aditya right after that. Darshil, you wanted to make the point about Amazon and what's happening there and how it's not only the well-cushioned who are losing their jobs. Go ahead.
So I don't have data overall Amazon, but as far as I know, the most of the people who were laid off in my team were new hire, and one of the main complaint that I had was like, at least you should have a performance criteria when laying off people, not the tenure. If you are firing people based on just because they just joined recently, then why you hired them at the first place?
Vivek is reminding me, as we discussed that Tim Cook did take a pay cut, and it's a very, very important point to make at this point. Vivek, go ahead.
He didn't overhire, and when it came to it, he blamed himself, and he took a pay cut, so he didn't lay anyone off. That's the way it should be. that these leaders should be held responsible for making bad decisions. A lot of these companies did make bad decisions by overhiring, by not anticipating the fact that the pandemic would be over and the economy would change. So the responsibility does lie at the top, as you rightfully pointed out. These leaders aren't doing that, and this is not the way it should be.
Yeah, well said. And I want to bring in Aditya at this point. Aditya, I'd rehired your platform. You're promising to help people find new jobs. But if there is a problem in the economy, if there is a simultaneous sort of pink slipping at all of these big tech majors, where are you going to find these people jobs, Aditya?
I think what we are looking, there's also an untapped market where a lot of jobs are not advertised on job portals, right? So recruiters held it. The companies know that we're going to hire something sooner, and there are a lot of jobs that are going to come over to India, right? As a result of jobs getting cut over in the US or in Canada or in the West, right? So what we're essentially trying to do is cut the cycle and help the candidates connect directly with recruiters, right? And we are leveraging LinkedIn as a platform so that the two can come together. The recruiters find the candidates and they directly visit their LinkedIn profiles and connect with them. Now, the jobs right now in the market, I'm talking to a lot of my colleagues here in India. They're getting those offers. They are getting approached by recruiters. There are jobs, but of a different nature, right? Essentially, there in the West as well. So it's not like all gone and there's no jobs at all. The market is completely dried up. There are jobs, but it's just that the companies are shaping up. We have to look at this whole thing in the context of how the CEOs are managing their shareholder expectations vis-a-vis their employee expectations and their responsibility towards the market, right?
Yeah.
So at ReHyrd, what we're essentially trying to do is help bridge the gap between recruiters, bring them all together on a single platform and quickly help them connect.
Yeah, thanks for that. I need to start taking last comments, but CEO's responsibility, flagged by both Aditya and Vivek, is a very important one. Akshay, I'll start with you. It's a point you've been making as well. Capital management, shareholder management, not to surrender simply to your investors breathing down your neck saying, hey, what's your stock value? And if that's what they're doing, then find other ways to at least protect the least earning people in your company. That said, at some point, if a department isn't working, it isn't yielding returns, you may have to take the tough decision of closing down something that's no longer working. How do you balance those two impulses, Akshay?
No, but that's a job, right? That's a job. Strategy, capital allocation, and be able to foresee. That's a job. So the CEO is not doing better, or the CEO and the management team is not doing well if they're kind of not being able to do that. So you have to be able to foresee. You have to be able to kind of speak to enough people out in the open. You have to be able to start allocating capital in a much better way when you see something like this is going to happen. By the way, this is not new. Everything that is happening right now, we knew about this 6 months out, 8 months out, 9 months out. People were talking about this even in April last year. So could CEOs not take better decisions and do all the things that are being discussed in the panel over the last 9 months? Not pay out bonuses, take some salary off for the leadership in those 8 or 9 months, and then maybe you could have avoided what is happening right now. So I think, of course,
I think that's a great question.
leadership has to take some blame.
Leadership has to take some blame. Asha, do you agree that this could have been better handled, better anticipated? Vivek is citing Tim Cook for more than one reason here. Asha?
I think the CEOs taking a small cut or shaving a little bit of their own profits or whatever is, I don't think that's going to make a big difference. I think right now what's going on is this is the optics that some of these big companies are playing to, which is to make sure that they are actually addressing the panic that's going on Wall Street right now. They're trying to address these questions. I think deep down they all know that they're going to be hiring back a lot of people that they have, that they're going to be, I think, matching, the layoffs and probably replenishing the staff in a few months. But I think they are addressing the concerns of Wall Street, and Wall Street doesn't understand what's happening in Wall Street. There's much more of a panic situation as far as the interest rates go up, the inflation numbers, although they've been better in the last week or two. There's this general sense of panic elsewhere, and I think the tech companies are responding to that. So I actually think that CEOs taking a small pay cut is not going to be a big deal. Although I think it's a very good signal that somebody like Tim Cook has given. I wish that more of them had done that.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, that it may not make a difference to the larger economics of what's happening, but it still sends a signal down the chain so that people like Darshil don't feel, listen, I'm 24, my CEO is earning X amount, and here I am looking for a job in the next 60 days. That symbolic value should still, in a sense, be celebrated. Deedy, you made the point, I think, about Twitter losing 75% and still functioning as Musk wants it to. Is it time to reimagine the future of tech? None of you have really taken on the ChatGPT sort of beta through your way. Will you do that? How much is AI going to transform the look of jobs in the future?
Look, I should first say that Twitter is not working great without 75% of their staff, but it is running.
Yeah.
So that's one point. As it pertains to AI, I think some of the AI will take all your jobs rhetoric is a bit overblown. That said, AI does make a lot of jobs faster and more efficient. What the impact this has on headcount and hiring is unclear. But it's to be seen. We don't know that. I can tell you as an engineer myself that there's something called Copilot, and 50% of the code I write, I don't write. It just does it for me. So so people are becoming more efficient. But I don't think that this is the reason why the layoffs are happening, or I don't think it's that they're
So
necessarily related.
it isn't that AI is the enemy, as it were. Aditya, you wanted to come in on the evolution of tech. Go ahead, Aditya.
So yeah, technology has evolved, as we've seen in the last 25 years. So developers, the kind of work that they were doing 25 years ago, it's not the same thing that they're doing today, right? AI-based tools will become a must-have in every developer's kitty in the shop, in the medium to long term, right? So the kind of work that they were doing, let's say, if you were not there on the web 15 years back, right, your business would have ended up struggling. If you were not on mobile 5 years back, your business would have been struggling. Now, if you do not jump onto the AI bandwagon, right, so you might find yourself struggling, failing to compete in the next 5 years, right? So that technology landscape has continuously evolved over the last 20, 25 years. And it's only this information age, the internet age, has reduced those business cycles, right? So earlier, any revolution would come in, let's say, 25 years or 30 years or 50 years. Now it is shortening, coming down to 5-year spans, 10-year spans, like that.
Yeah, I think that's important, that if you do not embrace technology and adapt to it, it's going to outpace you anyway. So whether AI is going to take jobs or not is in a way meaningless, because AI is here to stay. It's not going away. ChatGPT is going away. So we've got to learn how to maximize it. And in fact, I heard from a young student I know at National University Singapore, who said his teachers had actually said, use ChatGPT, we're not going to stop you. Use it, because you can't pretend that kids aren't going to do that anyway. Darshil, you said it's not about tech, it's about companies wanting to expand too quickly. As somebody who's been laid off, I'm sure that makes you a little cynical.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
I said, you said it's not about technology, but companies wanting to expand too quickly, too soon. Go ahead with your last thoughts.
Yes, so while working, I have seen and I was really impressed by the projects that were currently going on in Amazon, and it really changed my way of thinking about tech. And definitely for completing those projects and to be in the market, they are expanding beyond our imagination.
Yeah. Let me take this to Anshu. Tech is not the problem. It's companies wanting to do too much too soon. There's a sort of burst and burn kind of phenomena, and this has nothing to do with that ChatGPT is not going to undermine human value. Anshu, your last thoughts before we close with Vivek. Anshu?
Yeah, so I think when I'm running my company, Skyflow, I always ask two questions. One is this decision going to lead to something fundamental in 2 years or 3 years? And my advice to everybody who's been laid off is to ask the same question to themselves, right? All these buzzwords, what I'm saying and everybody else is saying, is sort of just interesting for most people. But if you've been laid off, you have only one question to ask. Will there be more engineers involved in building things 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 24 years from now? And, in the last 20 years I've been in the US, every time things have fallen apart, the answer is categorically yes. Now, is it going to be painful? Yes, but you don't have to lose hope. all of these companies are going to be bigger. They will all need more engineers. We are growing 400%. We are hiring. I think it's very convenient to fall for, 35% people got fired this month than all of last year. But we're forgetting that right now, I was searching on LinkedIn while we were all talking. There's 300,000 jobs open on LinkedIn right now in America. There's another 600,000 to 800,000 jobs which are not even posted because people are just tired of begging for these companies. So when somebody who is even mediocre engineer at Google gets laid off, there are hundreds of retailers and airlines and companies that are dying to hire those people for hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And you have to keep that perspective in mind.
I have to hope that you're right, because what we don't know for those job opening is how many applicants there are for those 300,000 jobs, and I don't have that data. But I want to give Vivek the last word. One of the ironies of this conversation, of course, is that most of the big tech companies in the world today are being led by Indians. And to that extent, that's an irony I want to underline. But Vivek, you made the point that India will be the winner in all of this. Let me give you the last word on that note of optimism. Go ahead.
There are two sets of opportunities. Number one is what you've been asking about, ChatGPT AI. When I was in Delhi and Bombay a few days ago, I had several students ask me what should they be studying. I said, forget about studying IT the way the earlier generation of Indian engineers did. Learn machine learning, because if you can master it even while you're in high school, you'll have an advantage over everyone else. It's like when tax software, when Excel came out, the accountants who ended up using Excel and tax software became more valuable, not less valuable. That's the number one opportunity for India. The number two opportunity for India is that all of these H-1Bs who are now in a state of shock, the majority of them will not be able to get jobs within 60 days, because it's very hard, especially if you've been here for 10 or 15 years, you're settled in your job. If you've been at Facebook for 15 years, you're less employable than someone who just joined Amazon 7 months ago. So it's very hard for them. They're going to end up going back to India. Now, India's economy is still growing. In India, entrepreneurship has become hot as hell. There are dozens and dozens, more than 100 unicorns, even now, even with the downturn. And opportunities are rising. India has built a digital economy, digital infrastructure like no other country has. So all of the opportunities right now are in India. If I was a student, what I advise my students here in Silicon Valley is go back to India, because that's where your future is. And what's happened over here with the layoffs and with all the stupidity you've seen over here, immigration policies, and all the changes that are happening in AI are all in India's favor. So from an Indian perspective, it's win-win-win. All right. Okay. Yes, from a Silicon Valley perspective, people who are being laid off, it hurts. It's going to be painful. But you have to realize where the opportunities are. If you look at the macro picture, India wins.
Well, I would like to end on that note of optimism, at least for my country. Thank you very much to all of you, to Vivek, Asha, Anshu, Deedy, Aditya, Akshay, and in particular to Darshil. We hope you land on your feet and find a new job and a way to follow your dreams very soon. It'll be interesting to watch this space, and we hope to have many of you back maybe in a few weeks from now to look at what the picture is looking like at that point. Thank you very much. Take care. And to our audience as ever, thank you for watching. See you tomorrow. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.